Hi guys, welcome to the last video of today's lesson. I am going to do two examples for you guys for how to use the Pythagorean theorem. So let's start with a simple right triangle. And let's say I ask you to find the missing side. We'll call it x. And I tell you that one of the legs is length 6 and that the hypotenuse has a length of 10. Well, in that case, I am going to start by remembering that for any right triangle, the Pythagorean theorem tells me that for the legs, if I square them and add them, that'll equal to what would happen if I squared the hypotenuse. So now I'm going to take my triangle and plug in the values to the formula. So instead of a squared, well, one of my legs is x squared, so I'll call that x squared. And then instead of b squared, one of my legs is 6, so I'll call that 6 squared. And then c squared is always the square of the hypotenuse. And just in case you don't remember the hypotenuse, we go right across from the 90-degree angle. So in this case, it would be 10 squared. Now we're just gonna keep solving this, keep simplifying. I know that 6 squared is 36, and that 10 squared is 100. And I want to know what x is. I want to know what that missing side of the triangle is. So I'm gonna start taking away this 36, making sure to do that on both sides because of the equal sign. And I start to solve for x. So I've got x squared left over on the left. And 100 minus 36 is 64. Now, how am I supposed to figure out what x is when it is squared? Well, last week you guys learned about how the square root is the opposite of squaring. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now, that leads me to think, okay, well, what is the square root of 64? Now, I could do this on a calculator, or I could look at a multiplication table. I'm going to tell you right now, if you don't know what the square root of 64 is, that's probably one that you should look on the multiplication table for, because that's one that you probably don't want to be caught using a calculator for in the future. People would be like, what? You don't know the square root of 64? It's okay if you don't know it right now, but you should try and learn it over the years. Okay, I'm hoping you took a second to look it up. But the square root of 64 is 8. And remember that when you take the square root of something that is squared, all you get is the base right back out. So that means when we took the square root of x squared, we're just going to get x right back out. So we get x equals 8. Meaning that we can go to our original picture and fill in that blank. There's flowers. All right, for this next problem, let's say you are decorating for a party and you got this 9-foot pole. It's 9 feet. It's outdoors and you kind of want to like decorate it like in a May Day style where there's these like garlands coming out from the ground, and you want to figure out how long to cut the cute little garlands. Maybe there's sparkles on them, maybe there's little flags, we'll see. And you're hoping that this is like a structure that people can hang out around, that they could walk under. Like you're really hoping to make it like very artistic, but also something that people can like walk in and around and maybe like take cute photos around. So what you do while you're mocking this up, you decide, okay, I'm going to draw a picture that just shows like one of these garlands. And I know that I'm going to attach the garland, like I'm going to tape it down to the ground about 12 feet away from the pole. So here's the pole, and you want to attach the garland about 12 feet away. So here's the garland, but you you know that eventually you want the garlands to be like a little droopy, right? Which would mean they'd have to be a little bit longer. So for now, you just draw like a straight line because you want to see like, well, what's the minimum I would need to cut like the garland in order for it to go from the top of the pole to 12 feet away. Because if you find the minimum, then as an artist, you can make the decision to make the garland or string a little longer so that it can be like a little curvier and floaty in the wind. But if you cut it too short, then you won't be able to attach it like 12 feet away, right? So you've drawn this diagram and you want to find out, okay, well, what's the shortest I can cut my garland so that my artistic sculpture can actually happen? And once you've drawn this diagram, you're like, well, hey, wait a minute, this kind of looks like a right triangle. And back in middle school, Miss Rana and Mr. Sapp taught me about the Pythagorean theorem. And because you learned the Pythagorean theorem quite a few times in middle school and in high school, you remember that the formula is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, what do those letters mean? Let's remind ourselves that A and B are always the legs. So in this case, A is the height of the pole that you're going to attach the garlands to, and B is the distance away from the pole that you're going to attach the garlands to. And from here, it is a simple task of plugging in our numbers. So we know now instead of a squared, we're going to write 9 squared. Instead of b squared, we're going to write 12 squared. And on the other side, we still don't know how long our garland needs to be, or the minimum its length could be. So we'll leave it at c. So we can call this c squared. Well, what is 9 squared? That is actually 81. What is 12 squared? That is 144. This is equal to c squared. We still don't know what this is exactly equal to. All right, 81 plus 144. Well, let's see. 1 plus 4 is 5. 8 plus 14 is 22. So we have 225 is equal to c squared, meaning we're going to need to find what c is equal to. Well, how do we do that? We know that we can use the square root to undo the square, and that takes us straight to c. But remember, when we're solving equations, if we do something to one side, we have to do it to the other side as well. Well, the square root of 225, what is that? Well, since I do not know any perfect squares that are close to 225, I can't really start estimating because that would take a little bit longer because, like I said, I don't know any squares close to it. So in that scenario, if I'm allowed to, I will use a calculator. So when you take the square root of 225, you should get that c is equal to 15. Now be careful because we were originally measuring in feet. So you want to make sure that in your answer you include that this is 15 feet, right? And what we were looking for is what is the minimum of string or garland or whatever you're using to decorate in order to have each of these strings be about 12 feet away. So now you know that the minimum you should cut each piece is 15 feet. But of course, if you want to make it more droopy, you can make it longer than 15 feet. So this is how we can use math to kind of inform our decisions in the real world. This is just one example.